But let me say this.
Because with the acculturation and assimilation came a breakdown in Jewish religious loyalties. Culturally, wesentlich nicht,
but it's much more Jewish
too.
than Denver, Colorado was when I grew up. I, you know, have never ceased to be amazed that there's much more commitment to Judaism here. In fact, if you look at the Canadian statistics in terms of Israel, the percentage of Canadians who have been to Israel many times is much higher.
The money we give.
In the United States.
Yiddish speaking, of course, is much greater here a generation ago. Places like Winnipeg, Montreal, it was already fading in the U.S., but here, you know...
here it's already fading as well,
but Gerät Yiddish is a generation ago.
I was quite happy here.
Yeah, yeah.
I've always been very happy in Hamilton.
I wanted to talk about two things. One, which intrigued me, Marjorie, was what does it mean when you said that you got out of the Rebbitzin business? I understand how one gets into the Rebbitzin business. How does one get out of...
By a conscious effort.
When I came here, I considered myself an adjunct to Bernard. And I worked very hard at the temple for no money. I mean, I ran the religious school, I started the nursery school, I did all kinds of things, helped with the sisterhood. The modern Rebbitzins don't do that. If you know, Gloria got paid from the beginning. But we were very naive. I think that the rabbinical school, when Bernie went, didn't teach them about working out their pensions and getting paid properly and all that stuff. We really gave of ourselves a great deal to the community. More than anybody else.
But he's asking you how you got out of the Rebbitzin business.
Oh, how did I get out? Well, my kids started to grow up, and I got very restless, and I wanted to do something meaningful. And I got a chance to work part-time in the biology department at McMaster. Like I was a lab assistant. And that was my first job. Well, they finally paid me after many years. They paid me $600 a year to run the religious school.
I didn't remember that.
Oh, I remember it all.
Well, what'd you do with the money? I mean, what does it mean?
Invested it.
Well, he didn't have any, he never got paid
We invested
properly.
it.
I mean, they never even paid health insurance for him.
Marge, how did you get out of the Rebbitzin business?
Okay, so I got the first job. And then I got another one, I got a better one. I worked as a research assistant in the metallurgy department 3 days a week or something. And then when my kid was, my youngest kid was in grade 12, my life changed. I met Dave Sackett, who was the chairman of epidemiology. And it was about our mitzvah, actually. And we were both very interested in a lot of the same things, because I was involved with the Jewish general community. I was the chairman of the Social Planning Council. And he knew all about the neighborhood integration. I had him to a panel. And then I read he had a lot of money. That was when the medical school was just started. So I called him up and I said, I'd like to come work for you. So he says, come on up. So I went up. Luckily, I found out what epidemiology was before I went.
That's a good idea.
And I became the Rebbitzin of the epidemiology department. And to mark my leaving the general community, I did two things. I set up the joint sisterhood meetings, and I got the Christian groups together. We worked out a film series on we had films on ethical issues, and there was a Women's Council of Churches. Did we get involved with that? And we got the Catholics, because I had Mrs. Nolan helping me. We had the Catholics, the Protestants, and the Jews, and we showed these movies. I remember one of them was The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and then had a discussion about ethics after that. And we ran 4 of those programs, and we filled the Mohawk College.
But you don't talk about public relations at McMaster.
But that was before I left. I left the Rebbitzin.
But you haven't mentioned that.
Yeah, but I left being a Rebbitzin. After that, I retired.
I remember you were very, very involved in PR.
Well, I was the public relations for our Faculty of Health Sciences.
Right.
That grew out of my job with Dave Sackett.
My guess is that this kind of ecumenical work that you did was more than that which was done at the Addis Israel.
Of course, the Orthodox community showed very little interest in that, and the rabbis were totally out of it.
Yeah, Rabbi Silverman even. never really.
No, most of the interfaith activity recommended was carried on by the Reform Rabbi, Reform congregation, to some degree by the Conservative congregation, and almost to no extent by the Orthodox synagogue. It wasn't part of their Weltanschauung, outreach. I would say that the kind of ecumenism that flourished a generation ago has passed to some degree. It's not as necessary, Now it's mostly concerned recently with anti-Semitism. But this was getting the Jewish community involved in the larger community, which didn't know the Jewish community.
And Christian groups came to the temple.
Right.
There was a lot of that.
And then, of course, at that time, the Catholics couldn't come to temples. But then the Pope, the good Pope.
After Pope John the 22nd, things opened up.
Then he said that it was okay, so all of a sudden we're overwhelmed by the Catholics.
By virtue of whatever dogma,
Vatican II.
They were forbidden from entering the synagogue?
Yeah.
That's right. They did. Well, let me put it this way. Maybe it wasn't dogma. It wasn't what was done. After John the 22nd, the Second Vatican Council, things opened up considerably.
Right. Help me to understand another phenomenon which you probably were connected to in some way. The temple had an afternoon school.
Yes.
There was the Talmud Torah, to which you referred earlier.
We had a Sunday school for all the kids.
Also an afternoon school.
The afternoon school was Hebrew. And everybody didn't come. In fact, at the beginning, it was mainly boys. And then you introduced Bat Mitzvah. And it was the first time girls had ever had.
We had our own schools, yeah.
Marilyn Cohen, I think, do you remember her?
You had both an afternoon school
and the Sunday school.
As well as the Sunday school.
Yes, right.
And I didn't realize that when you came here, there was no Bat Mitzvah ceremony. I didn't realize that.
When we came here, there was no, that's right. No bar mitzvah, no bat mitzvahs, no.
Bar mitzvahs, there obviously
Of course,
were.
yes.
There were no bat mitzvahs.
I don't think so, no.
Oh, no, the women, giving women rights in Judaism. I see Beth Jacob is now giving equal rights to women.
Right.
Took them a hell of a long time.
But what I was getting at was so the temple had its schools. There was the Talmud Torah.
Right.
Then there was a move afoot to introduce the Hamilton Hebrew Academy. Was there a total consensus in the community?
No. About the academy?
About establishing a day school, an Orthodox day school?
This was done under the aegis and auspices of the Orthodox community.
Mm-hmm.
The only disagreements were in terms of funding. And I remember several very heated meeting at the Jewish Community Center in Delaware as to what proportion of the money raised by the welfare fund was to remain in Hamilton and go to Jewish education. And the question was what proportion would go to the day school and what to the other schools. And Green opted for 75% of the money based upon the number of kids that were going to go and their needs, and the other schools. And that was the basis for some dissension. We didn't argue against the creation of the school on any ideological grounds, although some may have opposed it. The only basis for criticism was in terms of how the money was to be distributed. And that was eventually settled. It was a committee that was set up to deal with the whole question of funding and proportions. So we ended up at 12%, or Beth Jake with 14%, and that was 80%. So
I see.
In recent years, there has been some unhappiness with the day school because it's been run, they feel, as a yeshiva katana, and they set up Kehila as a other kind of school and along more liberal lines for people who weren't happy with the traditional orientation there.
Now, a lot of people think the temple set that up, but they didn't.
We have nothing to do with it. Meets the temple. So they claim to be non-denominational.
And there was the Beverly Country Club.
Yeah, that's another interesting.
That was a big fight too.
Why was that a fight?
It wasn't a fight.
There were fights.
A group of golfers who felt they were not at home or accepted in any of the local golf clubs, which was true.
Right.
Set up their own golf club. There were a few token Jews, very few, in the other clubs, and they weren't happy. So they set up their own club. There were some people in the community who felt that this was a social kind of thing, you see, because they set up a house there, and and social activities, and they felt this was for the elite. And some members of the general Jewish community felt that this was going to serve as a basis or differentiation between the golf set and the rest of the Jewish community. The wealthy golfers, that passed in time. It was discovered that the golf club wasn't such a tremendous thing, and not everybody belonged to it, and some of the richer people didn't like it. That initial concern passed. But there certainly was some concern when the golf club was set up that it was going to separate people in the Jewish community between the golf set and the non-golf set.
To some extent.
Interesting.
To some extent, early years it did.
But of course, the trouble with Hamilton is it's not quite big enough. You know, the Jewish population, and actually the Jewish population has shrunk in recent years. Hamilton really could have used, if they say they had 3,000 more Jews, they could have kept supporting the Beverly and kept it as a Jewish club, but there just aren't enough people.
Well, that's
and in
true.
fact, that's why the yeshiva had to close. You know, he had to close his yeshiva.
Right.
And
Right.
And the day school's in trouble too because of dwindling
there aren't enough kids.
enrollment. Well, Marjorie's right. For a while, there was some hot
That was a big
debate
fight.
in the community for a couple of
Sure,
years
I
in terms
remember
of that set against this set.
No,
And
Joe and Ann never, our friends never joined the Beverly.
Because?
Except for Ruby and Al. Ruby
some
and Al were,
some did, Marge. There was
Ruby
quite
and
a
Al
bit.
Burns were golfers.
Margie quite a bit joined. Among the original starters was Yalis.
Yeah, but they weren't our friends. I'm talking about.
Oh, well, I don't care about friends.
What were the big fights about, Marjorie?
The idea was that that golf club was going to set the community into two divisions.
Right. Like a
The golf club set with their social activities, and the bar mitzvah was going to be held there, and the people who couldn't join, the Jews who couldn't join, were going to be left out. Didn't turn out that way as time went on,
Yes, it did.
to some degree. And early on.
You know, Bernard, you have really. You're
Early
not involved
on-
in the social life. Bernard is a.
Anyway, we
rabbi.
view these things somewhat differently.
Yes.
They really should have two
because
interviews
you're
here.
Two different people, I might
Yeah,
point out.
two different
but,
people, right.
That's why we're so successful.
Precisely. But were you as successful in introducing the bat mitzvah, do you think? Talking about success, were people kind of...
In the religious school, girls began to come in greater numbers.
See,
You
the boys went to Hebrew school.
The girls went to the Sunday morning program. Everybody went to the Sunday morning program, but mostly the boys went in the afternoon.
Right.
I encouraged more of the girls to go in the afternoon to get a superior education, and the parents agreed. And the girls who went to the afternoon school were now eligible for bat mitzvah.
I see.
And so those that went to the afternoon school, and as their friends began to see they were bar mitzvah, the other kids wanted to get involved. You know.
This was a condition of being bat mitzvah?
Oh, you had to know your Hebrew. You did exactly everything that the boys did.
So the different parents wanted, kids wanted who were not in, so before you know it, we had more kids coming to the afternoon school.
I see.
And eventually almost as many girls became bat mitzvahs.
First, we had the girls could only be bar mitzvah on Friday night. You remember that?
That was an option.
I thought that was at the girls couldn't be bar mitzvah.
No, it was an
Saturday morning.
option.
I think you're right.
For a while, the bat mitzvah was not made as important as the bar mitzvah. Some of the parents were willing to have their girls come in the afternoons and to be bat mitzvah, but they didn't want to spend the amount of money involved in the bar mitzvah celebration. After all, it's a girl. It's okay, she should come. But after a while, the temple decided, what happened was, when the bat mitzvah was announced for Friday evening service, members of the congregation wouldn't come because they were not invited to the bat mitzvah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's right. That was.
So the ritual committee said, that's out. Friday evening is open to everybody. And so we switched the bat mitzvahs to Saturday morning, to Shabbat morning. And that became accepted in time. People no longer remember the Friday evening thing, you know.
Then I think that Jacob started to have a sort of a semi-bat mitzvah.
I was 1967.
You could not read from the Torah, but you could read from the
I had a
Haftarah.
group bat mitzvah.
The
That's
group
what-
bar mitzvah.
Group bar
That's how
mitzvahs,
they
yeah,
did it.
yeah.
And you couldn't read from the Torah. You could do something.
Haftarahs, you
Jointly-
know.
Jointly chanted a Haftarah, like 12 girls. at the
Yeah,
same
I
time.
remember that, yeah.
And then I think they do something at Addis.
Oh, yeah.
It was similar
in a
nature.
Women's service or something.
Yeah, women's service.
And but as a result, a lot of girls. Well, my daughter's a very good example. Went to the Temple youth camps, and she got her PhD from Yale in Jewish studies, and she's a very well-established Jewish scholar. But of course, she had a very hard time when she went to Yale, because the Orthodox men wouldn't talk to her, you know, in her class and so forth.
One of the reasons that the Beverly was established, as you point out, was because it was difficult for Jews to either get into or else
Right.
go at home at some of the
Yeah.
Right.
local golf clubs. So that's another way of saying anti-Semitism was basically what drove
Yeah, it was
that.
covered up anti-Semitism.
Long tradition in those clubs to keep them Christian, maybe largely Protestant, I don't know.
Remember the story? You went to the Hamilton Club. That's a downtown club. You ever seen the Hamilton Club? It's on the corner of.
Sure, they know the Hamilton
Yeah,
Club. Wendy's.
Yeah.
I know that.
And
Wendy's.
somebody invited Bernard there for lunch, and there was a lawyer in town named Cecil Robinson, whom in your hearing said that things are getting pretty bad when they bring a Jew in here.
I never heard that, Marge.
You forget a lot of things like that. He doesn't.
I was asked to join the Hamilton Club. That I know very well.
was an exceptional.
And
moment.
I had to be passed,
Yeah.
and I wasn't. I was refused.
Why?
I was Jewish.
I don't know why that does it, but it does.
There were no Jews in the Hamilton Club. I was asked by a judge in the community, incidentally, to join the club.
Now they got Jews now.
I wasn't anxious to join the club. First of all, there was an initiation fee which I could hardly afford. And what do I need? It was largely for businessmen who lived downtown to have lunch. But I said, if there was some way to break down that barrier and I can become a member of the club, fine. So they had a committee and they turned me down, and the person who introduced me was extremely embarrassed when he had to tell me that it didn't go.
What year was that?
Oh, it's a long, long time ago. Today, of course, the Hamilton Club is eager to have Jews because they need money and people everything's broken down. True for the Rotary Club, by the way. When I came
Charlie Levinson was the first Jewish member of the Rotary Club.
Charlie Levinson was a guy like Herman Levy who became the token Jew in many of these institutions. I don't know if you remember Charlie Levinson. They ran a shoe business.
Well, he was related to you.
Well,
He was married to my grandfather's sister.
Yes, that's
right. He was a nice guy, Charlie Levinson. Very nice guy. Very smooth and active in many things. He was the only Jew in Rotary. I never knew whether Rotary was anti-Semitic or not, whether Jews never applied for membership there, you know, it could work both ways. Eventually, Jews became active there. I'm a member of the Rotary Club simply because and they can have a minion there anytime you want, you know. So everything has broken down in that regard. The Dundas Golf and Country Club didn't accept Jews, you know.
Oh, I didn't
As time went on,
Yeah.
In Westville, they had a restrictive covenants on buying houses.
yeah, that's right, in our time, and that was broken down by Judge Keeler Mackay. In other words, all of these old sentiments couldn't withstand the winds of modernism involving greater democratic religious
Right.
acceptance, you know.
Right.
So I'm sure anti-Jewish sentiments exist, but you know, we now in Canada, I don't have to tell you, have anti-discrimination laws, anti-employment, and you know,
No, it's a different.
different world altogether.
To be sure.
And Jews are getting, you know, honorary degrees at McMaster University, and you know, it's a different Geschichte altogether. I remember the first honorary, Ken Sobel, I think, was the first that got the honorary degree.
Is that right?
Either he or Max Senkin.
Well, Max Enkin may have been. I don't know that you know Max Enkin.
You were in Copley, Noyes and
Cambridge
Randall
Close.
here, Cambridge Close.
Cambridge Close, but he always lived in Toronto.
Yeah.
He wasn't related to Murray.
Yes,
Yeah,
Murray's
his
father.
Oh, okay.
Murray got an honorary degree.
McMaster? No.
Yes, he did. The Faculty of Health Sciences. There was a whole business because they offered to Dave Sack.
Oh,
and
that's
he
true.
refused,
Murray
and
got an honorary degree.
and
That's right.
Dave, they were on the same chat line, and Dave made some comment about getting a lousy honorary degree from McMaster and didn't take it. Murray saw the correspondence.
Bill, look at it this way. A new rabbi is coming to town at the temple next week, 2 weeks. How does his situation 55 years later differ from my coming to Hamilton in that early period? It's like from day and night sociologically and almost in every way.
Right.
Economically, socially, culturally, Jewishly, in every way, this is a much more attractive community for a rabbi coming to town. you know, in every way, it's much more sophisticated, affluent, intelligent.
My guess would be, with all due respect, that both of you contributed to that in a very.
I would hesitate to say no.
I don't see why you'd be interested in even thinking.
Marjorie was really very much involved.
Well, of course, I've stretched out to the broader community.
Marjorie had darts founded. You helped found.
Well, I've got. I'll give you 2 of them if you each want one. I'll give you 1 too. I did this for my kids for our 50th wedding anniversary, because they gave dinner honored both of us individually. So there's a little sort of a CV of.
Yeah.
I also have an honorary degree from McMaster.
Yes, I thought so.
And they gave it to me in those early years. I gave 500 talks in this community in my early, I don't know how many years. Every home and school association, that's what they called them in those days, had me speak to them. Every service club in the community, innumerable organizations, you know, and I was willing. I was willing and able.
Occasionally write a book review for the Canadian Jewish News.
For 40 years.
And you know that there's a movie. What's his name? Eugene Levy made a movie called A Mighty Wind.
And he's supposed to, I don't know.
Where he parodies Rabbi Baskin.
I don't know whether.
And you're watching that movie and you're looking at Eugene and you're saying, it's familiar. And then suddenly it's, oh my God, he's doing Rabbi Baskin.
You know, that's so interesting because my son-in-law, Jack McKay, who's a filmmaker, he caught it. We didn't catch it. We saw it. We went.
Can I tell you something about that? I want to tell you something about that. I saw the movie. I saw that movie.
Yeah.
It took me a fraction of 1 second to figure out that I was listening to Rabbi Baskin.
No kidding.
It took me about a half an hour.
This seems to be a general notion.
A fraction of a second, I turned to Rivka, I said, who is that? And we were talking about it last night, in fact, when I said I'm going to be meeting with both of you today. So, and he was from Hamilton, was he?
You think this was, you think this was conscious, do you?
Of course.
Oh, I don't
Well,
know.
Marty Shorts, I know, does imitations of Bernie all the time.
Really?
Well, that's not in the movie.
Marty was sort of like our adopted son, you know. Marty was a Catholic, but his father sent him to public schools, and he went to our temple. And he started at the temple nursery school. I started the nursery school, and which is still going. And so Judy and he were in the same class, so they went all through school together. And
So he could
so when his mother died first, and then his father died when he was in college. He was at McMaster. So there were 4 Jewish families that offered to adopt him, including me. And he used to come here for dinner Friday nights. And I went to his wedding.
You ask if it was consciously done. At the end of the movie, A Mighty Wind, your name is mentioned.
No.
Yes, but they do it in a very clever way. It's when they have the reunion, and Eugene Levy's sitting on the stage with his former partner, and he's reading from a poem that he wrote to her when they first met. And he says, I want to bask in your whatever. And that was the clue. I mean,
Is that right?
Yeah, and it was there on purpose to show people that this is Rabbi Baskin.
You wonder if this is all part of
He
it.
lives in Toronto. He's never given up.
It's like the Da Vinci Code, you know?
Right, exactly.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.